Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Travels with Preston, your boy Preston, and today I'm local in my state of Virginia, and I'm at James Madison Montpelier, and I have the lovely Hilarie here. She's going to take us on a tour around the house. Now, previously, I toured the grounds maybe 2 years ago, so check that out. Should be under the Virginia playlist. So, Hilarie, so give everybody a brief introduction of yourself and what you do at Montpelier.
Sure. My name is Hilarie Hicks, and I'm the Senior Research Historian here at James Madison's Montpelier. And the short answer to what I do is I look stuff up for people who ask me questions.
Perfect.
So some of it is doing research to help with other departments, like if archaeology is going to be working on the overseer's site, they might want to know what we have in our database about overseers at Montpelier. Sometimes I'm answering questions from the general public or from students. I also work on a couple of projects, one being the Plantation Life Project, where I've been doing research into the operation of Montpelier as a plantation, what was grown here, livestock, that sort of thing. And then I also work on a project called the Naming Project, where we know the names of 300 people who were enslaved at Montpelier over the course of the 3 generations of Madisons living here. And so on our Naming Project page, we have listed the 300 names, and then I'm in the process of writing biographies for them. And in some cases, they're very short biographies because some people's names only show up in 1 or 2 documents. But then there are other people, particularly people whose last names are known and people who lived past the Civil War, where it becomes easier to track them in documents. So some people we can tell a very complex life story for.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Like I said, I was here before, and I kind of just did my own thing. I didn't take a tour, so I was just reading about it, and I did a little bit Googling. I Googled some stuff, so I do recommend it to anybody. You know, research some stuff yourself before you actually go, so you can get like a general idea of what you're about to see or witness and stuff like that, and obviously pick up some pieces while you're at the location itself. So I guess we can get started with the house tour. Where would you like to start?
Well, we'll start right here.
Okay.
So the house was built in several stages, starting with James Madison Sr., who was the president's father.
Okay.
And so the door that you all came in, this was the front door for Madison Sr., so it was a central hall and rooms on either side. And then the house was expanded later by President Madison, so more rooms were added on that side that we'll see later. But what's interesting is that even after James Madison Jr., the president, inherited the property, his mother continued to live here on this side of the house. And so we'll step on into Nellie's best room and we'll get an idea of what it was like for her living here.
All right. Okay.
So we call this Nellie's best room. And when we walk in here today, well, really the whole house to us looks old-fashioned. But in the time of James Madison's retirement, 1820s and 30s, people walked into this side of the house and they would say, you know, this really looks old-fashioned. The rest of the house looked up to date to them. So what looked old-fashioned to them would be this heavy paneled wainscoting. The furniture's kind of dark and heavy, the draperies are heavy. And so this really reflects Nellie Madison keeping the old style here, not really updating her side of the house. And people would oftentimes come to meet her after she had had her dinner, because she usually ate in the early afternoon. That was when people used to eat their big dinner. And then the Madisons ate their big meal around 4 in the afternoon. So in between those 2 meals was a good time for people to come and visit Nellie. And they talked about her sitting on a couch with her reading, her knitting, oftentimes with a prayer book or a Bible beside her. And so those are some of the little touches that we've tried to add to the room to give the feeling of how Nellie used it.
And how much of this is like original?
Of the paneling, part of the paneling is original, not all of it. Of the house in general, most of the flooring is original.
Wow.
A lot of the windows are original. So maybe ballpark 85% of the house
that's
is
a good
original
chunk.
material.
Okay. And that's a kitchen or?
It's actually a closet. We don't think of old houses having closets.
Yeah.
But sometimes people put in a closet just to take up the room at the side of the fireplace.
Okay.
And so not a closet for storing clothes, but bulky things. We've got some dishes in there and some candle molds.
Because I thought it was like a little kitchenette type vibe. Okay. Interesting.
And then the clock is interesting because the clock face and the clock works are actually from the original Madison clock.
Oh.
So that clock has seen a lot of time pass here.
Oh, okay. I've always wanted one in my own house.
They're pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay.
And
That's
then
pretty
from here you can also see, and we won't actually walk in, but you can see Nellie's dining room set up.
Okay. Okay. Appreciate that. And what would this be? That's something.
Oh, that's just modern.
This is okay.
Just a fan.
Oh no, I was talking about like the door. Like what would
it's a little closet under the staircase.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's original with the house as well?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's pretty interesting. How many rooms are in this house?
That is a good question. It depends on what you count as a room. I would say about 22 rooms.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot. What's this room?
So we're in the parlor now, and this is a room that was altered by Madison Jr. when he took over the house. So this had been 2 rooms, and he enlarged it.
Okay.
And so the door on this side, it was the central front door. That's where many of the Madison's guests would have come. So that when they walked in here, this was their first impression of the house.
Okay.
And I think a lot of the things in here communicate something about the Madisons, their sense of culture, their education, their sense of history, and their place in history.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we were furnishing this room, we had a lot of clues to go on. One was that this room retained its original plaster.
Oh.
And so we were actually able to go through and study where the nail holes were.
Wow.
And figure out, since we had the list of paintings that were here in the 1840s, and then we had this pattern of nail holes, we could get a sense of how
how it was laid out and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we had accounts from visitors who talked about what they saw here. And then also, behind some of the woodwork, we found some tiny little scraps of wallpaper.
Oh.
And by analyzing them, we were able to tell what color the wallpaper was.
Okay.
And that had a wool flocking on it, which gives it that sort of fuzzy.
Okay. Okay. What you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of artwork here in the drawing room, and when you look over to the side here, you can see there's a grouping of presidential portraits. And one of the visitors to the Madisons commented in his description of his visit, he commented that there was a painting of Washington, Adams, Jefferson, so that's 1, 2, 3 presidents, and then skips to number 5, Monroe. And he commented that Madison had not hung his own painting with the other presidents, that he was rather modestly over in the other corner with Dolly. So the visitor saw that as evidence of Madison's modesty.
Okay. Yeah, I see. I mean, the pictures. I see the piano. So there's a lot of busts. Were these? So was this something that would have been in here back then too?
Yes, the Madisons had a large collection, not only of paintings but of busts as well. And people at that time liked to collect busts of well-known people and it was sort of a gallery of worthies, important people.
Okay.
But what was interesting for the Madisons is that these were all people they knew. So these must have been very interesting conversation starters with visitors. So
I
there's
would say so. Yeah.
Madison himself, there's George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Robert Livingston, who was a politician from New York State, the Marquis de Lafayette, who was the Frenchman who was a general in the American Revolution. George Irving is behind me, and he was a American diplomat. And then Charles Carroll was the Bishop of Baltimore, Catholic bishop. And the Madisons knew him because he had actually helped them get Dolly's son, Madison's stepson, into a particular boarding school, Catholic boarding school in Maryland.
Okay. Yeah, I guess would this be like a great room, like you would think, like so when people come in, this is like I guess to be like the modern, with like the living room, I guess with some people, like again, nobody go in their living room. This is for guests and entertainment and stuff like that. Okay. This is really nice. And this would be some type of the furniture that would have been in there.
This sofa actually is it's from the period, and it was by a furniture maker named Worthington. And we know that the Madisons did own a Worthington sofa, not this specific one, but they had one by the same maker.
Okay. Yeah, this is interesting. So I see over here they were like, I guess they would have played cards. Now, what is this contraction? Like, what is that?
It's an electrical machine.
Oh.
And so if you cranked the crank, it would generate a little static electric charge. So if someone's cranking the crank and somebody else is touching the ball, they would feel a little shock. Or if a group of people stood holding hands, the shock would pass down the line. So
the entertainment back then.
Yeah. Kind of the intersection between that Enlightenment interest in science and your basic parlor trick.
Okay. And is that some type of, would that be that food or is that like?
No, actually, those are little plaster medallions.
Okay.
And that was something also that people collected at the time. They could be printed with different famous people's portraits and so forth.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. This is nice. It's a nice, great room. I wish I had a great room this big where you have entertainment. So you have chessboard and you have this huge painting.
Yeah, this is an interesting story in itself. We know the Madisons had a very large painting of this subject, which is Christ and the disciples at the supper at Emmaus.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that when John Payne Todd was over in Europe, Dolly's son, he was able to acquire a painting of this subject from the artist Charles Sprout and had it brought back to Montpelier. And apparently in his conversation with the artist, he learned that it had been intended for an altarpiece for a church, which is why it's so huge.
Okay.
And when we studied the nail holes in the plaster, we actually found evidence for heavy hanging hooks over here. So that's why we think the very large painting was in that corner.
Okay. It is very large.
And then opposite it is a painting from classical mythology, Pan, Youths, and Nymphs.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one actually is the original painting that we know the Madisons owned. And we were able to trace it through different owners.
Wow.
And so it's kind of interesting that you have a painting from classical mythology facing a biblical subject. Yeah. But those were subjects that a well-educated person in the 19th century would know both.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. And I see the Declaration of Independence.
Mm-hmm. And we know that Madison did have a copy of the Declaration of Independence, a printed copy that he kept here. And this was a particular edition of the Declaration of Independence that was printed with symbols of the different states around it, and Washington and Jefferson and Hancock on it.
Okay, cool. All right.
So that's kind of interesting because, of course, the Declaration was the work of Thomas Jefferson, who was a very good friend of Madison. So he's honoring his friend's work there.
It just amazes me, like, how all these people, like, because I guess it's so far back, a couple hundred years ago, but how all these people knew each other, like all these famous people. You're just like, oh, yeah, that's just George over there. You know, it's just kind of, it's kind of wild and, in theory and thought, so yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay. It's a great room. Oh. All right. So what would this room be?
So this is the dining room.
Okay.
And we have some cutouts here suggesting different people who dined with the Madisons. So we have James in the center, and that's where he preferred to be. He liked having
not
all
at the
the
head,
conversation
but
around
okay.
him. Yeah. And then Dolly was at the head of the table. And then that actually puts her very close to, through that doorway, there's stairs that goes down to the cellar kitchen.
Okay.
And so she'd be communicating with the enslaved waiters who were bringing food up and down. And we have a cutout of one of them, Paul Jennings, there. He waited on table. He was also a personal servant or a body servant to James Madison. And he's quite a fascinating individual because in the 1860s, he wrote a reminiscence of James Madison. It was called A Colored Man's Reminiscence of James Madison.
Wow.
And it's actually considered to be the first in the genre of White House memoirs.
Wow. Okay.
And then some of the other people who are sitting around here, we have James Monroe, who was also a good friend of Madison's, lived about a day's drive away, living in the Albemarle County area. And then this is Margaret Baird Smith. She was a friend of the Madisons in Washington, and she was the wife of a newspaper publisher, but she was also a writer in her own right.
Okay.
And she published some things, but she also wrote some wonderful letters and journals that give us great descriptions of being here at Montpelier.
Okay.
And then we have the Marquis de Lafayette at
Okay.
the end of the table. And he visited Montpelier on two different legs of his sort of grand tour through the United States in 1824-25. So he came back and took sort of a victory lap after independence.
Okay.
And we have a description that was written by his secretary of some of the topics that the Marquis de Lafayette discussed with Madison and the other guests. And so they talked about religious freedom, which of course Madison and Lafayette would be very much in agreement about. They also talked about slavery, which they were not in agreement about because the Marquis de Lafayette was very much an abolitionist.
Okay.
And Madison saw evils in slavery, but he didn't see a clear path out of it.
Interesting. Okay. So you think he was conflicted?
I would say conflicted, yes. And in his younger years, some of the things he writes about, he talks about wanting to make a living without being dependent on enslaved labor. But by the time he inherits Montpelier, he kind of settles into the same role as his father. And so he continued to have probably at any given time about 100 people were enslaved at Montpelier, and did not free anyone in his will.
Yeah, I remember that. That one stuck out to me.
Yeah.
That's why I was like conflicted, but he didn't free anybody even in death. So yeah. It's very interesting. But like I said, I mean, it is a touchy subject and stuff like that. So okay, I mean, I'm sure he has reasons or whatever, whether it was just the science of that particular time. But yeah. So do you think he would have, because when did he pass away? Did he pass away before the Civil War?
Yes, he died in 1836.
So do you think he would have had an issue with Abraham Lincoln, the whole war? Which side do you think he would have maybe, I guess, agreed upon? I know he's from Virginia, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's in itself.
It's a really interesting question because shortly before he died, he wrote something that he called Advice to My Country, where he said that the dearest wish of his heart was for the Union of States to remain. So on that side, you would say, well, he would be on the northern side for keeping the whole country together. But on the other hand, he did believe in slavery, and so maybe he would have sided on the Virginia side. I think it would have been a painful choice for him either way.
Okay. And so that leads me to my question. So what does it mean for you to work here?
Well, I've been here almost 13 years now.
Oh, okay.
And for me, it's just been fascinating to really delve deeply into one subject. And yet it's many subjects because it's the history of the Madison family. It's American history because it's the story of the Constitution. It's also the story of the enslaved community, and seeing how all those branches of history come here together at Montpelier. I'm never bored with what I'm
still like, as you guys excavate outside and find new things, and that in itself sounds exciting. All the different projects that you guys probably have going on. I can't wait to see how this progresses over the next, several years and stuff like that.
One of the things that was really exciting for me in doing the research for the naming project, I'm currently working on a biography for Sukey Stewart, who was the enslaved lady's maid for Dolly. And I was actually able on Ancestry to find her will. Really? Which blew me away, and it confirmed a lot of family relationships that we weren't 100% sure of before. So it's amazing that for as long as we've been studying Montpelier, that there's still new information out there.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I mean, just imagine the stuff that's lost that you would never, just documents and stuff like that. So I can only imagine what you guys are finding now. But yeah, I would, and it's one of the things as a African American or a Black man, or just a Black person in America, how much has just been lost through, at least on, I guess, the enslaved side of things. Just where they came from, their story, their heritage, their culture. So yeah, I can only imagine what you guys are finding now. Yeah. So I look forward to, as the stuff progresses on, I definitely want to make sure I stay in touch so I can hear about the stories that you guys are finding.
And that's one of the other things that I find fascinating about working at Montpelier is it's really important work because we're telling stories that haven't been told and that need to be told.
Do you have volunteers, or could a person come and volunteer?
We do have volunteers in certain areas, so particularly archaeology makes use of a lot of volunteer talent. And then other positions like being a guide at Montpelier are paid positions. And we are often hiring for them. So maybe some of your viewers would be interested.
I hope so. And that's one of the things why I do this, why I go around the country, the world, highlighting certain things, is because a lot of people get complacent, even in their own backyard, where they'd be like, well, I'll see that later on, or I never heard of it. So like I said, I've been here since the late 90s. My first time here was in 2021. No rhyme or reason, just never thought about doing it. And then when I started my YouTube channel, I was like, okay, let me start going places and seeing the world, or Virginia, the DMV area. Because there's a lot of history here based upon the colonies. So just that in itself, I mean, you have just a plethora of just information, just just literally here already. So I'm enjoying myself learning about these different people that came before me. So
there are always plenty of new places to go, places in your own backyard.
Yes, exactly. Now these portraits, so I guess, is that Niagara Falls?
It is.
Okay.
It may be surprising to see Niagara Falls.
Yeah, because I was like, why is that?
Yeah, but Niagara Falls was sort of the quintessential wild American landscape.
Is that what they probably perceived the West to be? The frontier or something like that?
Yeah, and today, of course, Niagara Falls is very much a tourist attraction.
Yes.
But it was just a wild, natural something to see at that time.
Okay, well, it's still something to see. I haven't seen it yet. I definitely want to see it.
It's cool.
So who are, that's an interesting photo. This one right here.
This one, you're going to stump me on this one.
I did. I would choose the one thing.
It's one of the King Louis, but I'm forgetting which number.
Yeah, it just really caught my eye. I was just like, okay, who is this guy? He looks important. Like, okay, Andrew Jackson. So yeah, like I said, he has there's a lot of notable people. And who was that?
That's actually James Madison.
What year? It's like, looks different than the pictures I'm familiar with.
It's sort of an idealized portrait, I guess I would say, kind of more in a classical style. Kind of like if you think of the carving of Washington that's in the Smithsonian where he's in a Roman toga. It's kind of that idealized.
Okay. And like you said, this is the dining room. Mm-hmm. So what room would that be?
We can actually walk in there.
Oh, okay.
This is a room that we just refer to as Mr. Madison's room, and it was
feel like an office. That's what it feels like. Study, office,
and it has a bed in it also, so sometimes it could have been used as a guest room. But in Madison's later years, he was very much affected by arthritis.
Okay.
And so he wasn't able to get around all that well, and he spent most of his time in this room and what we call the new library.
Okay.
But the fact that it's right next door to the dining room, he really liked, because he would ask for the door to be left open if he didn't feel up to sitting at the dining table. He wanted the door open so he could still participate in the conversation. He, even up to very close to the time of his death, he really enjoyed having visitors out here at Montpelier. And sometimes they were people that he knew, sometimes it could be old friends from back in the days in Washington, could be extended family. But a lot of times the people who came to visit at Montpelier were just people who were curious about Madison and wanted to visit him.
He would allow complete strangers to come in? Wow.
I mean, we would not drop in on a retired president nowadays.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
And there are people
just the access of that.
Yeah.
That's mind-boggling. But okay.
But that happened quite a bit. And it was it was a way for him to keep in touch with the rest of the world. But for the people who came to visit, it was a chance to, it was living history. In fact, that's what Margaret Baird Smith said at one time, just listening to Madison's stream of conversation, because he could talk about the Constitutional Convention, he could talk about the Continental Congress, he could talk about everybody from Alexander Hamilton to Patrick Henry.
Wow. That's a lot of famous names. Okay. And these original books, or?
They're from the period.
They're from the period, okay.
It's interesting, Madison, in his will, left most of his books to the University of Virginia.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in the 1890s, there was a major fire at the Rotunda, and that's where the library was at that time.
Okay.
And so most of Madison's
books and stuff.
In that.
Okay. Yeah, this is interesting. Like you say, he has, I guess he has tea or coffee. Mm-hmm. His a rocking chair.
Yeah, he had a rocking chair. I think he referred to it as taking exercise in the rocking chair, but I think in the sense of it gave him some relief from the arthritis.
Yeah. Okay.
And that particular tea and coffee service, it's one that the Madisons actually owned.
Oh, okay.
It's a French porcelain.
That's nice. I'm so glad that we do this, like just across the world, how we, just preserve, whether it be structures or items and stuff like that. I really do, because it just gives a look back into the past. I really love that. I think that's one of the best things that we have done as humans, just across the board.
And there's a power of place to be in the place where the Madisons were. Mm-hmm. And there's something, too, I think, about being in the presence of the things that they owned.
Yeah. It's so interesting. You have a bed right there, so you keep the door open, you can still communicate with your guests. Okay. I'm gonna have to think about that in my own house. Okay. This is cool. Is this bed original, or is it like from the period?
From the period.
From the period, okay.
But we know that he had this kind of bed.
So okay. Okay. Did they have running water?
No.
Okay, you know how some houses I've been, they'd be like, oh, we was progressive. We had electricity, or we had this or that. So, okay, so they had like an outhouse or something?
Mm-hmm. Had a necessary house, which interestingly, we have not yet found the location of
really?
through archaeology. But there would be a necessary house outside and chamber pots.
Okay, so it's called a
inside.
necessary house.
Necessary
Okay,
house.
not an outhouse. Okay, all right. Okay, I'm learning. Okay. So what is this lovely room?
This room is the new library.
Okay.
And so the last part of the house to be built were the wings on either end. And
Okay.
Madison had them constructed while he was president, anticipating his retirement.
Okay.
And so this one is referred to as the new library. So we think it started out as a library, but in later years had a bed added to it when the Madisons weren't going up and down stairs as much. So in their later years.
Okay. So would this be a guest room-ish? Or is it one of the actual...
We think probably used by the Madisons.
Okay.
Because particularly as Madison's arthritis advanced, he wasn't going up and down stairs the way he used to.
Okay.
So he'd be perhaps sleeping at night in the bed here, napping in the daytime.
Daytime,
in
okay.
the next room.
Okay, and I see there's a bird, a parrot right there. Is that I'm sure there's a reason why it's in here.
Yes. The Madisons actually had a pet parrot. Her name was Polly, very original name. But it had been given to Dolly Madison by a South American diplomat.
Okay.
And that after the Madisons retired from Washington, they brought it back here. And Polly apparently was the terror of the household.
I would assume so. I just feel like it's flapping all over the place.
Yeah, and was known for attacking visitors and scaring children. And,
wow.
And at one point, one of the guests was rescued by James Madison from this parrot. And then the parrot bit James Madison's finger down to the bone. And he excused it as being only Polly's way. So I'm not sure what that says about the Madisons as pet parents.
Yeah, that's... I would have been like, it has to go. Okay. And I noticed I guess that's because there's no central heat, obviously, anything like that. So every room essentially has a fireplace?
Right.
Okay. We got backgammon.
Mm-hmm. So it's a very much multi-purpose room. The Madisons might be sleeping here at nighttime, but they could be enjoying backgammon with either just playing themselves or with guests. We have one description from Margaret Baird Smith, the lady in the dining room, where she talks about coming into the bedroom with Dolly and sitting and doing some of their needlework as they visited. So we have some needlework set out for that.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I love the globes. The globes are really cool.
Yeah.
I love those. Wow. Okay. So, and you said like the flooring. So back then they wouldn't really have carpet? I mean, not carpet, but like rugs or anything like that? It would just be more hardwood or?
It depended. Some rooms, they had individual carpets. Some of the rooms actually had some evidence of tacks around the edge of the room that they had a wall-to-wall carpet in some rooms.
Okay. And that would just be a back door leading to the porch in the back. Okay. Okay. Makes sense. Is that supposed to be like a chamber pot or?
Yep.
Okay.
You don't want to have to run all the way out to the necessary in the middle of the night.
So especially if you say arthritis, you may not make it. So, okay. That was cool. Is that an outfit or?
Yeah, that's, I think it's a vest.
Oh, it's a vest.
Yeah, a vest.
Okay.
Oh, no, I have to take that back. It's the short lady's jacket.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. All right, so what's this room?
So we have 2 bedrooms up here on this side of the house. And this is the side of the house that was added on at the time that James and Dolly got married.
Oh.
And so the next one that we'll see will be the one that started out as their bedchamber. And this one we're showing is a bedchamber for John Payne Todd, who was Dolly's son from her first marriage. So she was from a Virginia family, although she was born in North Carolina.
Okay.
And then her family were Quakers. And so at a point in time in the 1780s where it became legal for people to emancipate enslaved people without doing a special petition to the legislature, at that point, all the Quakers in Virginia started freeing the people they had enslaved. So Dolly's father, after freeing the enslaved people, moved the family up to Philadelphia.
Okay.
And so Dolly, as an adult, she was a teenager when they moved, and as an adult, she married Quaker lawyer John Todd.
Okay.
And they had 2 children. And then in 1793, there was a terrible yellow fever epidemic in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And in just a few weeks' time, Dolly lost her father-in-law, her mother-in-law, her husband, and her baby.
Wow.
So she was a widow with a toddler son. And that's when she came to James Madison's attention. He was in Philadelphia because he was in Congress. And he asked for an introduction through a mutual friend who was Aaron Burr.
Oh, man.
And so
Okay.
Burr introduced the 2 of them. They courted for a few months, and then they got married.
Okay.
So when Dolly came down, they stayed in Philadelphia for a while because of Madison being in Congress. And then when he retired from Congress at the end of the Washington administration, they moved to Montpelier with her son and also her younger sister, Anna, that she thought of Anna as being almost like a daughter. They were very close. And then John Payne Todd continued to have, there was always a room that was identified as his room at Montpelier. He had a very complicated life. Today we would describe him as someone who had addiction. So he was gambling, he was drinking, he ran up a lot of debt. He also, in his diaries, indicated that he was always trying to do better. And so, today he probably would have benefited from being in a 12-step program or something like that. In his time, there wasn't really any support. It was just his addictions were looked on as a moral failing.
Yeah. This is interesting. So I see this is that would be his clothing type deal.
Yeah, we put some clothes out to suggest him. And we also have a rat
I was listening to you, and I was just like, happened to be like, hey, what is? Because I was like, that's not supposed to be that. And I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, okay.
It's not real.
Yeah.
And it's not original. But our reproduction rat is here because rats actually played an interesting part in the restoration of Montpelier.
Really?
Because rats make nests in the walls. And when we were restoring Montpelier between 2003 2008, we took it back to the Madison era. We found a lot of rats' nests in different parts of the walls, and rats make their nests out of things they collect.
Oh,
smart.
So
we found a lot of things like scraps of wallpaper, scraps of upholstery fabric, So the rats were the early preservationists.
So I appreciate it, rats. Way to keep it going. Oh, okay. This is nice. The bed. Got nice views. And this is, like, I'm assuming that opens up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my closet.
Storage.
Okay, yeah. And of course you have that. Okay. It's a nice, modest, I guess, room, I'm assuming. And I'm assuming Madison's room must be really nice. I'm not assuming much larger than this.
A little bit larger, yeah.
A little bit larger, okay. Okay. So now we at the master chambers.
Initially started out as the master bedroom, and then in later years when the Madisons moved downstairs, this became more of a guest room.
Okay.
And there's actually a Frenchman who stayed with the Madisons, the Baron de Montlezun, and he described his room as having a view out to the Blue Ridge Mountains, and also having access to a rooftop terrace. And this is the only bedchamber that has both those things.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Okay.
And so there are little things about this room that do make it higher status room than the son's room. So this
it's the detail.
Fireplace, yeah.
Okay.
And that's original fireplace with that design on it.
Okay. Yeah, this is nice. I mean, I guess this would be the largest room in the house, correct?
Largest bedchamber.
Yeah, bedroom.
Anyway.
Okay, yeah. Okay. And so you have a hand. Would that be something that Miss Madison
Something that
would
Dolly would have, yeah.
Okay. And there's another. I'm assuming that's a female's top coat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sort of short jacket.
Short jacket. Okay. Was that velvet or
That one is a velvet.
Okay.
Yeah. Some years ago now, it was probably about 10 or 12 years ago now, PBS did a biography program about Dolly Madison.
Okay.
And we were able to acquire some of the costume pieces from that. So they're not original to Dolly Madison, but they were nicely researched, nicely made costumes.
Okay. Now, I have a question. All right, so you've been here for 13 years, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, in those 13 years, even before, but whatever 13 years, what are some stories? Like, is there anything that just like, oh, man, just blew your socks off? Like, oh, I did not know this, and I'm taking this with me for the rest of my life. I don't remember anything else. I have a story to tell. You have one of those?
Well, I would say maybe not a single story, but one of the things that I think people don't know about James Madison is that he really had a sense of humor.
Really? Okay.
And we don't think about that because his public persona was very reserved. He seemed to be very either quiet or in some cases downright unfriendly in a large group setting.
Okay.
But if you were visiting him at Montpelier, if you were in a small group with him, having around the dinner table, something like that, he was quite the storyteller, and he had a lot of amusing little anecdotes and a lot of witty wordplay.
Okay.
So I find that just a very interesting aspect of his character.
Okay. And do you think that was normal for that time from people of his prestige like that back then to have that playful, sense of humor and stuff like that?
Well, I think there were other people who shared his sense of humor.
Okay.
But his friends described his sense of humor in a way that makes you think that he had a particular style.
Okay. Like I said, this is wonderful. Just the room I saw. So you guys assumed that it may have been this type of color?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a typical color for the time period.
Okay. I see that little clock on the mantelpiece. That looks very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I don't have a lot of details on that. Mm-hmm. It's from the period.
Yeah, it just looks, like obviously it goes with everything and stuff like that. So, yeah. I see you got two little portraits of him and her facing each other.
Yeah, James and Dolly in silhouette.
Wow. It's a very comfortable room. Looks comfortable. And you said this goes out to a terrace on top?
Yeah, when we were in the old library, that's a one-story addition to the
Okay,
house,
so you
there's
can-
a little terrace on the top.
Okay. Okay. I like this. I see like they have like a writing table in like pretty much almost every room. You just never know when a thought may come to you, I guess. Okay.
And that Madison wrote a lot of letters too. And
Oh, really?
one of the big projects for James and Dolly in his retirement was organizing his papers.
Oh.
And particularly the notes that he had taken during the Constitutional Convention, he wanted to have them published after his death. And as it turned out, Dolly was not able to find a private publisher to do that, so she ended up selling the papers to Congress. So they're in the Library of Congress now.
I've never been to the Library of Congress. I need to go. I definitely need to visit that and see what that looks like. Okay.
Well, the great thing now, the Library of Congress has so much online
Yeah.
that you can view his papers that way too.
Yeah. And that's a good tidbit for you guys. Do you guys have an online, anything online where they can like virtually tour the house, or is it just come here?
Well, we do have Montpelier.org is our website, and there's many different things that you can see on the website as you dig down further into it. And so I'm not sure off the top of my head if we have a virtual tour on there now, but there's many different things that you can see. And also our related website that's called Montpelier's Digital Doorway.
Oh, I never heard that one.
Yeah, that focuses on our museum programs division. And so there's a lot of information from the archaeologists, from research, from preservation and collections, and it really gives you a behind-the-scenes view.
Is that the museum that's in town, or because I think I read it's like a James Madison Museum or something
There's
like that?
James Madison Museum
Is
in
that-
town. That's a separate
Oh,
organization.
it's a separate. Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was connected or any way, but okay. I did see it, so I'd never been in there, but okay. Like I said, this is a lovely house, and I really appreciate the tour. Is there any other part of the house that you care to see, or that we care to show, or?
Yeah, I'd like to take you into the old library.
Oh, okay. Okay, so this is the old library, you say?
That's right.
All right.
So the old library, if we think back to when James Madison is growing up at Montpelier, this would have been his father's library.
Okay.
And then in the 1780s, he was in between legislative assignments. He had come back here to Montpelier. He was very concerned about how the government was going under the Articles of Confederation.
Yeah.
And so he started a research project here. He asked his friend Thomas Jefferson to send him some books.
Okay.
And he really wanted to study study examples in history where people had tried to govern themselves without a king. And so he looked at ancient Greece and Rome. He looked at the Helvetic Confederacy. He looked at the Swiss cantons, any examples that he could find. And the main thing that he kept coming up to was that eventually all these republics or confederacies fell apart because the central government wasn't strong enough.
Okay.
And he was very concerned because that's what he was seeing happening in America at that time. And so he took these ideas with him when he went to first the Annapolis Convention that was called in the summer of 1786 that was going to try to improve the Articles of Confederation. That not enough states sent representatives, so that didn't work out.
Okay.
And so he went back to New York, where he was in Congress. He continued analyzing the problem, thinking about what the vices were of the present political system. And then when the Constitutional Convention was called in the summer of 1787, he had all these thoughts in mind.
Okay.
And it's interesting when you read some of the notes that he took that were published as the proceedings of the convention. oftentimes he is referring back to these examples that he had studied when he was here at Montpelier. And so we think of this as a very special room because in some ways it was the birthplace of some of the ideas that ended up in the Constitution.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Like I said, I see letters. I guess there'll be letters in the corner. Obviously many books and stuff like that. Wow. It's a lot of books.
It is. Madison collected over 4,000 volumes, so about 1,000 titles, because many of them were multi-volume works. Yeah. But we have gone through his papers and tried to come up with all the different titles of books that he owned, and then we have collected the same titles in the same editions. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, his books, most of them burned at the EVA fire, Rotunda fire.
Okay. Just a perfect place to, I guess, to gather your thoughts, looking out. American woman.
It was a very inspiring view. I mean, when you think about it, Madison would be sitting there looking west, looking out to the Blue Ridge Mountains, looking out in the direction that the country is ultimately going to go. So you could think of him sitting there and looking at America's future.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Yeah. This is nice. It's like I said, I don't know. I think I like the old library better than the new one for whatever reason.
It does have a cozy feeling.
Yeah. And I just like the view as well. I mean, the view is amazing. And like I said, if anybody's never came here, like just the view, like when you're driving up in your vehicle and you see how, I guess it's similar to Mount Vernon, how he has that thing where you can just pull up in the front, the little half circle, or maybe a full circle. I really do like that because I guess that's when you would come in. Like I said, directly underneath is the main entrance for guests and stuff.
Right.
Okay. Now, so I have one last question for you. So as visitors come, what do you want them to take away, after their visit?
One thing I would like them to take away is just the idea of how complicated the past is and how, trying to reconcile the idea of the important work that Madison did on the Constitution that influences how we govern ourselves today. But he was also an enslaver. Yeah. And so we don't want to say that either one cancels the other out. They're both aspects of his life that we have to grapple with both. And I think also there's complexity in the story of the enslaved people, because I think if you don't know a lot about the enslaved community before you come here, you might have just a very generic idea of who the enslaved people were. But I would hope by the time that somebody leaves Montpelier, they know the story of individual people, of Paul Jennings or Sukey Stewart or George Gilmore, who was a freedman who built a cabin across the way from Montpelier. And I'd also like people to go away curious. I want them to go home and read a book, go home and look up.
Kind of spark that interest.
Yeah. Go read the Naming Project or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into it. I guess obviously off camera and stuff like that. But yeah, I definitely want to see this Naming Project because I do follow you guys on Instagram and I do see that you guys do throw out certain names. And I like the constitutional quizzes too.
Oh, yeah.
So I answered those as well. So make sure you follow them.
That's actually another thing I would like people to go away with is the feeling of being connected to that whole process of American government and to want to go home and vote on election day and do research on their candidates and really see themselves as having a role in government today. Okay.
Well, like I said, I thank you for your time. It's been a blessing. Like I said, I know you guys were not open today. So I truly are very, very humble for that, that you guys even allowed that to happen. And you're taking away from your busy schedule. And like I said, from me, my audience, my wife behind the camera, shout out to my wife, and Hilarie, I really thank you for this whole tour. Like I said, this is my first time in here. Like I came last time, but I wasn't able to get inside. I think it was renovations or maybe I didn't stay long enough. I can't remember. It was like 2 years ago. But I'm really proud to come back and actually meet you, and then you get an actual personal tour. So I get to ask my personal questions and stuff like that. So I really thank you. Is there anything else you would like to say before we sign out?
No, I think we covered a lot of territory, and it was a pleasure to have you here. And I
appreciate
hope all the folks at home will come here.
Yeah, I hope they come here. Please come here and support and learn and stuff like that. Just get out the house and just see your state of Virginia if you are in Virginia. But come on out of Virginia. Virginia's for lovers. So yes, we love everybody in Virginia. So like I said, this is Travels of Preston signing out from James Madison Montpelier, and I see you guys next Monday. Peace.